Welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled, actually. I'm grateful and thrilled to introduce Derek Perdue. He's a board certified functional nutritionist. And not only does he bring the excitement and the passion of the whole body wellness journey, from fitness to chronic issues, the pieces plaguing us, he's incredibly talented as an entrepreneur and has essentially brought back to this world this idea of intimate and caring types of wellness journeys with so many new tools, so much innovation, and he's super highly successful running his practice called Fit Infinity. And it's where he can apply all of his experience and functional nutrition expertise to essentially apply these unique insights in optimizing a practice for maximum impact. So I want everybody on here to pay particular attention to this idea that we're not only do we need a successful per patient, but the whole practice needs to be successful in order for it to achieve maximum results. And without further ado, I'm going to let Derek give us a little background. I'd like Derek to give us, a little part of his journey as we get into this. Thanks for being here, Derek.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that amazing acknowledgement, Dr. Shane. I really appreciate that. And yeah, so my name is Derek, and I feel like I've spent my entire career in the world of functional nutrition and human optimization and regenerative medicine. But I didn't start here. I started like many people do, grinding through the conventional health system, that often treats just symptoms and not root causes. And actually, when I was in college, I was in pre-med. I started in pre-med. And somehow at a young age, I somehow discovered that this isn't the system that I want to be a part of. So I pulled out of pre-med and I literally went the opposite way. And, it was probably the best decision I've ever made. So I've worked with, elite athletes, very complex medical cases, autoimmune conditions, fertility challenges, and families looking to simply feel good again, kind of A to Z. And in every chapter of my journey, one thing became painfully clear. Most people are piecing together their health through fragmented care. And so, my thought was, what if there was a place where everything came together? Diagnostics, medicine, recovery, training, nutrition, and longevity, all unified under one roof. What if instead of treating conditions, we optimized human beings at every level? That's the question that led to what's called LifeMuse, which is the new company that I am currently building. And it's exciting. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But as a board certified functional nutritionist, I've dedicated my life to understanding how the body actually works. And I love every part of it, not in theory, but in real world, complex and clinical settings. Over the years, I've built protocols for high performing individuals, helped clients reverse chronic inflammation, overcome hormonal dysfunction, and heal when the system told them healing wasn't possible. That's always been exciting for me. But this next step, LifeMuse, it's about really building a legacy. It's about creating a place that doesn't just respond to illness, but helps people reclaim their vitality, their energy, and really their human potential. It's the culmination of decades of research, clinical practice, and collaboration with some of the most brilliant minds in medicine, biohacking, and performance. So LifeMuse, as I'm so excited to present to the world, is not just a facility, it's the embodiment of everything I've learned and everything I believe people deserve access to. And I couldn't be more excited to finally share it with the world.
Yeah, that's exciting. And it is the epitome of this fragmentation. I love that you said that, because everything is reductionist. Even when you think of oftentimes how everything's segregated into body parts, and no one brings that back to the whole, whether it be from your gut to your brain to your emotional status. All of that needs to be brought back under one umbrella. And I think that is the mission of essentially what we're all doing. That's fantastic. And having that all in one place, you've got to be pretty excited about that. That's really exciting, in fact.
Yeah, no, it's exciting, and I don't look at it as just a clinic or a gym. We're legitimately building what we believe to be the most advanced regenerative wellness center in the world. It's fully integrated. It's a 360-degree ecosystem designed to optimize the human experience. And what we're doing and currently doing, just going to take it to another level, is we've combined the latest in regenerative medicine, cutting edge diagnostics, high performance training, cellular recovery, and what we call engineered nutrition, which is where systemic formulas really comes into play, all under one roof.
Well, that makes me excited, of course, because we're excited to be part of this. And in terms of the engineered nutrition and the idea of maximizing the clinical impact, can you talk a little bit about how you might phase in systemic and alimentum products into this journey or this evolution of health, really?
Yeah. So great question. Yeah. So my approach is rooted in biological sequencing. So it's not symptom chasing. And I don't build cookie cutter protocols. I architect systems that evolve with the patient's biology. So I move through generally, 5 primary phases. Each one is designed to address the core physiology required at the moment in their healing. So phase 1 is what I call, and again, generally, like there can be situations where I may, phase this differently. But phase 1 is typically what I would call like immune prep and foundations. And this is where, we assess for stealth infections, low-grade bacterial, fungal, or like viral burdens, as well as nutritional deficiencies, of course, and regulatory imbalances. One of the things that I always do is I always run a CBC with differential. It's really, really important. I see a lot of CBCs, but with no differentials, but the differential tells you so much about what's happening. I really highly recommend that. And whether you're dealing with parasites, viral patterns, bacterial stress, or underlying immune suppression, I also look at, things like ferritin, vitamin D, homocysteine, cortisol trends, and subjective symptoms like brain fog or chronic fatigue. So depending on what I see, I'll bring in products like Immunogenic for immune modulation and inflammatory response. I love methylgenic. For me, it's a cornerstone here, especially in DNA reports, that show MTHFR, MTR, MTRR, or COMT variants. And the MyDNA, that you guys have is incredible. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the report includes 12 panels, and I think it analyzes over 1,500 mutations from your entire genome. So, that's huge. We use that all the time. I'm a big believer in tailoring support based on genetics. So if cognitive fog is prominent, neurogenic may also be introduced right in phase 1 as like a support element. Energenic is another go-to here when cellular energy and mitochondrial function are, clearly impaired. So that would typically be my phase 1. Phase 2 is more of like a pathogen clearance and detox. So this is where we would move into active pathogen elimination. So often addressing parasites, candida, SIBO, mold, low-grade viral loads. This phase can last a minimum of typically 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the level of infection. And I love to use Clear 1, Clear 2 extensively in this stage to modify the gut terrain. Bindgenic is always going to be present, binding microbial toxins, heavy metals, and endotoxins without depleting minerals. That's a really big one. Enzygenic, I really like that one. Also plays a role here, supporting digestion and keeping the microbial balance in check. And then phase 3, this is typically where we go in and we do like a gut, I'll call it like a gut heal and seal. And this is a big one. It's really about rebuilding the mucosal barrier, restoring microbial diversity, and reducing intestinal permeability. For this, I love Terra Superfood Prebiotic plus SBO plus plant nutrient powder that really does a great job at nourishing good flora and supports the gut lining well. Terra U Biomic is one of my favorite spore-forming probiotics for recolonizing gut terrain. Melagenic is another great one, which helps regenerate the mucosal barrier and reduce inflammation. And again, Bindgenic continues in this phase typically to prevent the recirculation of toxins. And, I do watch markers like zonulin, stool inflammatory markers during this phase to guide how long we actually stay here. Phase 4 is more of like a cellular replenishment and resilience. Once the immune system is modulated and the gut is restored, we work on rebuilding energy, antioxidant defense, and really just systemic resilience. Energetic often comes back into the rotation here. I also love Immune Superfood and Immune Ubiomic for broad immune support. And if the patient has high oxidative stress or cardiovascular concerns, I bring in things like ROX, CVO, HCV, HQ to really support the antioxidant pathways, the mitochondrial output, and the vascular elasticity. And then finally, phase 5 is typically where, it's optimization, and I would say like hormone optimization. This is when we really lean in hard on that, and organ-specific restoration. So this is where we typically, before this, we would retest the labs and tailor any ongoing support to specific hormonal, glandular, or organ-based needs. So for instance, if thyroid markers are suboptimal, I'll use things like TMI, liquid, the detoxigenic, Vista 1, Vista 2. Those are really great. Again, one of my favorites, methylgenic, energetic, electrogenic, the electrolytes, and also organgenic. That's a great one to support, all the endocrine and metabolic balance. So we're also looking at adrenal health, pancreas and liver function at this stage, not just sex hormones. But this phase really solidifies the work that we've done and sets the stage for long-term resilience. So throughout all this, what I could say, Dr. Shane, is, we don't chase symptoms. We respond to data and patterns. I also cycle the supplements. This is another big one. So I cycle the supplements to prevent adaptation and and to support the sustainable healing process or processes. And each phase that we typically run is right around 4 to 8 weeks, depending on the complexity in the labs. And, the strategy works because it evolves with the patient.
That's fantastic. I have a few questions now because this is an exciting, I think, introduction for hopefully all of our listeners here today too, because, this idea that, we don't want to chase symptoms. We don't want to be pushing any particular mechanism with supplements or diets, or, we want to bring this together, but oftentimes the patient has been doing something for so long that you have to bring these things back into play in a very deliberate and, I don't want to say cautious, but you have to have the journey ahead of you realistic. I know everybody nowadays wants, hey, I want this to fix this, I want that to fix that. And this actually takes the whole picture and introduces it in a way that the body needs it to be introduced. So I want to point out that we have a lot of different types of practitioners that I'm sure are listening, and I want to just point out that your approach, no matter where the practitioners are, your approach is essentially the same. I mean, my brain completely understands this approach, and anybody that may have their own approach or wants to improve upon the way in which they can utilize our products and maybe blood labs or other types of tools that generate important data, I want to ask you, for the sake of the rest of the audience, it's a lot, right? There's a lot of knowledge that has come into this. And so how do you recommend, or what have you done as an example to learn this and be able to apply it readily in your practice without having, without always being with your head in a book or your head in a diagnostic? And, there's so much going on that you've been able to turn this into a really efficient process. So is there any, based on your journey, is there any recommendation you'd make for people learning about our products, about learning new tools? Because maybe later on, you and I, we can talk about other things you can use like red light or hyperbaric and things that you also can introduce into this journey. But I think for a lot of people, you've got a lot of knowledge. How'd you get there? How did you make this all happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, this is a real passion of mine. It is a real love. And for me, one of the greatest things is to help somebody. For me, it's so valuable. And one of the things that I've always really enjoyed doing was, somebody comes in and, they've been to every doctor and they've been to every specialist or what have you. And there's just no answers, and if there are answers, it's really just things to suppress symptoms. And so, for me, I really took that honestly, because I'm like, imagine going in, okay, with your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister or your spouse, and there's something really happening, okay, and there's just no answer. It's not a good feeling. So I really took that honestly, and I was like, I'm gonna find these solutions. I'm gonna make this go right. And truthfully, Dr. Shane, I don't know if there was necessarily one thing that I in particular did, or one course that I took, or it really is a culmination of me just doing my actual due diligence, not just looking online and just taking advice from here, there, or everywhere. Like I really truly just I dove into this, and I studied, and I'm really big on education. There's so many different courses and things that I've done through the years, and for me, it's like I can't get enough. I'm just a sponge with this, and I just love it. And sometimes you have to sift through the things that may not seem very real. But for me, what I can tell you is this is my experience in doing this with real people, with real outcomes in real clinical situations. That has been, over time, that's been, I would say, my that's created the biggest understanding of how to do this. But again, I've got board certified, master trainer. So I've pretty much taken my life to understand the body and how it actually works and how it actually performs. And then, I was so grateful to run into Systemic Formulas, because it was truly the correct formulas to actually create solutions. And that's what's just been amazing.
Yeah, we share that. We share that passion for sure. I agree. My journey has been very similar in the sense that, we've always had access to whatever we want, really. In the United States and another Western country, we have a lot of access to things, but putting them together into meaningful and based on what the body needs, and we want results, right? We want to get to a healthy point. We don't just want to mask symptoms or mask issues, which we know can be done. People can go away for 2 weeks and feel good, and then it's right back again if you don't do the due diligence, as you mentioned. So that is fun. Yeah, we're very kindred in that sense. And I love that I do believe that to be really good in this space, you have to have some passion. Even when you're a kid and your grandfather, your grandmother, your mom or dad say, hey, try to find something you love to do.
Yeah.
Because that will set the tone for the rest of your life in terms of your professional and even your personal life. But it seems like a luxury, but it really is something that works. I've seen it over and over again. When you love doing it, it happens for you. It might take 5 years, 10 years. I've been doing this a long time, and it's still exciting to me. So I agree with you that you find your passion, and all of the practitioners should. Certainly, as hard as it gets for all these people that need help, if you're passionate about it, you want to solve the problem. It may take up a little bit of your brain capacity, but it's a good thing, right? You're contributing to the whole piece. Speaking to that, one of the things that, again, we have a lot of different kind of practitioners, but the body does talk to us, right? It talks to us in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Some people refer to it as intuition, symptoms, just the way you feel when you wake up or in the middle of the day or at night, or there's all these ways in which your body's speaking to you. And one of those ways, which is now, I think, much better than it was probably when people were introduced to like blood work or DNA, 10 years ago, we could pull blood, we could look at things, we could run genetics and look at these things. But 10 years later, we now actually have a lot more, I guess, intellectual ability to understand what it's telling us. Whereas a decade ago, like you said, people run a CBC, and if it was in some decent range, like, oh, no, you're fine. Your thyroid's fine. Your adrenals are fine, because we didn't know. We didn't know that these ranges were incomplete. They were just trying to avoid disease. They weren't trying to maximize fitness, right? That's a big deal. Whether or not you fall on this scale, and I've personally seen some of the improvements with a family member regarding like hormone panels. There's a lot of women need a narrow range of fitness levels, not these massive ranges they give you on a regular panel. So these are nuances that I think are now available, or at least can be available to practitioners. So when you look at blood work and other lab data, I think that absolutely is a tool that can tell us a lot more about what the body's saying. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. Blood work is one of the most powerful tools that we have, not just for diagnostics, but for building patient trust and mapping outcomes truthfully. I typically will always run, and again, they can be very extensive panels, they can be very basic panels, but I always run a CBC with differential, CMP, CRP, ferritin, iron serum, iron saturation, TIBC, homocysteine, vitamin D, cortisol rhythm, thyroid panels, lipids, sex hormones. And a lot of times we often do stool or GI mapping panels as well. But we operate off of what's called functional ranges or optimal ranges, where, like you were talking, the ranges are much tighter. So just a quick example, like in a normal reference range, okay, let's say on a CBC, it could be from 3 to 12, okay? But we work off of a range from 5 to 8. And so the way we look at it is if you're creeping up towards 8, 9, 10, 11, that's still normal, right? On a reference range. And so, your doctor may say, yeah, you're good.
Yep.
But the way we see it is something is occurring and something's building some steam. And so instead of saying, hey, okay, you're on fire, it's time to put you out, we're really there to, we're really there to basically prevent that fire from ever happening. And, speaking of the CBC, just to give you some more examples here, the differential is really essential. This is a really big one that I see a lot. It really helps to interpret whether the immune system is responding to bacteria, viruses, fungi, or parasites. For example, if somebody has, I don't know, high neutrophils with low lymphocytes, all right, that's usually often bacterial stress, fungal, or systemic inflammation. We look at elevated eosinophils, I'm immediately thinking things like parasites. Okay, depending on where that number is, the eosinophils, we like to be between 0 and 3%. I'm thinking parasites, mold, even histamine intolerance. If somebody has low globulin with, I don't know, high albumin, right? I'm looking at immediately, tells me there's possibly some gut absorption issues, long before it becomes a flagged pathology. So I don't just show patients a report. I really try to tell them a story. So, here's where you started. Here's what the data said. Here's what we're implementing. And here's what changed. And here's why that matters. So it's great because, like when patients see their CRP, their C-reactive protein drop, right? Their hormone ratios rebalance, or like we were talking about, their white blood cells normalize. They feel really empowered. Yeah. And it validates the work they're doing with us. So, alongside, like I kind of spoke about earlier, I also use a lot of genetic data, the MTHFR, MTRR, and the MyDNA to really guide methylation and detox strategies. And, I keep talking about methylgenic, but it is tailored for these pathways. And man, we've seen great results with this. It supports not just folate and B12 metabolism, but I've seen incredible things with homocysteine regulation and cellular repair with that product. That product is amazing. So ultimately, labs build momentum. They give us structure and they really remove the guesswork. And that's why I love it. And most importantly, they show progress in black and white. And, to me, that builds long-term compliance and patient confidence.
Agreed. I think it's fantastic. And no matter what modalities practitioners are using, I think that the next generation of what we all need to be doing is to incorporate multiple modalities. And I think, again, the problems you're facing and other practitioners are facing are so complicated, right? They're not the same thing as they used to be. You have a combination of, let's say, a parasite and dysbiosis, or a parasite and some other, they've been living on processed foods. So we have this, lipid dysfunction, insulin dysfunction. It's not simply just one thing anymore. It's usually complicated. And so we need to embrace these new modalities for sure, in my mind. And I know practitioners practice different ways, but incorporating these, and it's becoming so much more, I guess, easier, I shouldn't say easy, but easier to bring some of these into your clinic as a practitioner, in my mind, right? Blood labs seem to be more available than they were decades ago. The DNA, and I should probably mention to everybody that we're on version 3 of the DNA reporting. So those of you that have seen that, it started off with a super strict security protocol that made it kind of hard to navigate. That's now changing to, we're keeping it a strict security protocol, but we're making it accessible in more of a report format. So version 3 will be much more clinician friendly and patient friendly. We can do that for you from in-house when you send the DNA in, or we can grab the DNA and do it for you, but that will become web-based. Just for those of you that are learning this idea of DNA in general. We're trying to make it a little bit easier for each practitioner going forward. I just want to mention that that's forthcoming, so don't get too overwhelmed by the data. But yeah, Derek, that data is phenomenal, and it even has blown my mind away when it really began in this methylation process. We all understood methylation really well, and that was exciting. But I've now seen it affect things like hormones. I happen to have a gene for the LPA. Well, LPA means that I have to make life choices because I'm always going to be running high on the LDLs, which aren't a big deal. But if I add into that any level of carbohydrate miscommunication, like with insulin, I am putting myself at risk because I have a genetic predisposition for heart issues, right? Cardiovascular risk. So now that I know that, I can make choices, and our patients can do the same thing, which is exactly what you're saying. I still am really excited about this because your model and your entrepreneurship, I think, it's inspiring. And so, keeping along those same lines as you journey down that, when you finally get everything in place, or let's just say as you're doing it, you build this rapport and this intimacy with patients. And a lot of that has to do with the way you've built your business there, and that you interact with your patients. You have really cool tools like apps and things too. By keeping inventory, by keeping your finger on the pulse, tell me a little bit about that part of how you guys are transforming these patient outcomes, and at the same time how it's really I think it's novel in terms of an entrepreneurial business you're doing. It's not simply just a website sending people to buy it, or hands-off approach. It's very hands-on, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. This is interesting because this is one of the most important things I've done operationally. When I relied, like initially, we did some drop shipping, but when I relied on that, we lost control. And this is what we found through, statistics and other things that we track. So patients would leave without their supplements, forget to order, accidentally get the wrong product. Things can happen. And then they wouldn't start the protocol, or they would start it late. And, what I noticed is compliance would drop, and ultimately outcomes would suffer. So I'm really big on statistics, and I love to run a lot of statistics on outcomes and you name it. And so when I noticed statistics were in a dive when it came to compliance, I completely switched. I switched gears, and now we carry full inventory in-house. So all of Systemic Formulas and Alimentum products and more. And that means when a patient finishes their consult, typically, or when the program is finished, they can literally walk out with everything they need. There's no delay, there's no confusion, there's no shipping error, and they can literally start that night. And, I started to see the stat board, it was like an affluence. It really increases the compliance dramatically. And patients begin the protocol immediately, and that momentum carries forward into better results. So I think, Dr. Shane, I think from a business standpoint, it makes sense. So I've reduced fulfillment errors, increased efficiency massively, and added a reliable revenue stream that reflects the quality of our time and expertise. And I would say, more importantly, it feels like a true concierge level experience. And that's what I'm really trying to create. And patients know, we've thought through every step, right? It's not transactional, it's structured, it's professional. And that's what builds a clinic that retains and scales, in my opinion. Inventory isn't it's not just a back-end system. It's a clinical strategy that drives results and trust, in my opinion. And in LifeMuse, we're going to have, we're building in an actual on-site dispensary, which will carry a full range of systemic formula products, as well as, compounded therapeutics, things like that. But it's giving clients immediate access to elite grade supplementation and protocols right out of the gate. So yeah, that's been a game changer for us.
I love it. And I think it is absolutely critical that we all think about that, because I don't know, I'm paraphrasing, or I might even be assuming in some ways, but I watch statistics like you, and we've seen that our industry in many ways go from more like what you're describing, this intimate, full control, which is aiding in compliance and confidence and outcomes, to a lot of digital, a lot of everybody's far away from each other, and we just have to send them things or send them an email to tell them what to do, or FaceTime them. And there's still value there, no question. But we kind of swung the pendulum from what you're describing to complete impersonal, drop shipping. They're across the country, but you've never seen them. Telehealth, I guess, is one of the ways you can put it. I think we've gone too far. I think we need to come back to this. And now that there's so much more conscientious awareness of the health journey from just the people at large, anybody that is in a location should be able to market themselves in their area and get plenty of patients coming in, because everybody's concerned about this at this point. At least many people want to get better. And I think there's enough of it where you don't have to be, if you were a practice that was only telehealth, you can bring that back up. Wouldn't you agree that there's enough people in people's area now that they can reinvigorate this concept? I guess unless you live in the middle of Alaska, but even there, yeah, we have clients in Alaska. They love it up there.
Yeah. No, totally. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a really important, it's not only a niche, but in my opinion, this moving towards more of a personal approach is what we have to do, right? We've become too impersonal. And this personal approach, now that we have these tools, and like your LifeMuse, I think it integrates so many pieces that people have looked at, in different contexts when they should be looked at in the same context. Because I know you also use in your clinic, you can use things like important tools like red light therapy, and maybe even peptides, and so on, right? You can integrate so much when you have this comprehensive approach, and it becomes value added to everybody that comes through the door, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And nutraceutical, they are in the middle of the entire equation. It really is. If you look at center of disease, right, it's from the gut, and it's from nutritional deficiencies. So, I can just say that systemic formulas will be in my programs and protocols until the end of time for me. It's been that, if we didn't have HIPAA, I could screen share some results, because we have it all documented, and just some of the results that we're getting are just, it's incredible. And, like I said, it's actually really creating solutions and really helping people. I think one of the big things is just understanding how to structure, okay, you can take your labs, but you have to know how to break those down. And then where do you begin? Right. So let's say somebody has, a really low TSH or something like that. Okay. Thyroid. Instead of going in directly and handling the thyroid, okay, like full bore, go back again to the CBC and with diff and look at possible infections there, stealth infections, low-grade infections, and clear those up. Okay, really truly handle those. Whatever you need. If you need Bactrex, if you need FungDX, Bind, you name it. Okay, whatever's Vivi. Okay, whatever it is, handle that. Redo their labs in, I don't know, like we usually redo labs, it's case dependent, but anywhere from 90 to 120 days. Watch what happens to the thyroid numbers. It's incredible. And you didn't have to give the thyroid anything. And at the end of the day, let's say it increased, but it didn't increase to where you would want it in a functional range, let's say. 1.8 to 3.0 is great, by the way, for TSH. Then give it some support. But generally, if you pull that, what I call, it's an internal stressor. If you have an infection like that's happening and it gets missed, then you're not handling the thyroid is just the symptom, right? You have to look at where the problem is. And so that's just an example, right? But once you figure that structure out, oh man, it's incredible. It's awesome. You know what I mean? Because if you don't handle that problem, okay, in the CBC, and you give the thyroid some support, okay, you may have numbers that improve, but again, you cycle these supplements. So once you come off of the support elements for the thyroid, guess what happens? That viral burden or whatever was, creating the chaos there, it was never handled. So it will just reoccur and consistently and constantly reoccur. So yeah, and again, it's just an example, but boy, oh boy, once you get that nailed down, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Again,
it's so exciting. I agree.
It is. Yeah.
It's so exciting. And we get to see that now that we've, I'm going to take a second to give you one of our, people that we've worked with, clinicians and their patients. We've been doing DNA panels, and what we're seeing, like other groups, is there are a lot of minimal but underlying DNA polymorphisms that we need to be aware of, right? Because we've deviated so far from a healthy lifestyle, the DNA actually is not working for us like it used to, right? Our DNA wants to fix us, wants to help us, wants to keep us healthy. But when our lifestyles changed so dramatically in the last 100 years, DNA can't catch up. DNA is not capable of pivoting and adjusting to these terrible lifestyles. So when you look at the DNA and overlay it with the symptoms and the other problems, it starts to give you this underlying information. And let me give an example that I found so fascinating. We ran a DNA panel for a practitioner, and a lot of the markers suggested that they were going to have really, really bad dysbiosis, or poor gut markers from the gut lining, the mucosal membrane, as well as the bacteria themselves, right? If they weren't paying particular attention to their microbiome, for example, their DNA was not going to work for them. It was going to work against them. So then later, not too long after that, we ran a microbiome analysis, and they were in complete agreement. Now, not to mention that the patient was struggling with food, struggling with all kinds of downstream issues, like you said, thyroid and brain fog and all these things, because of, if you go, track back to the beginning, where the DNA meant that you needed to be really conscientious of your diet and your gut, and the microbiome was out of whack. So anything after that's going to be problematic. And they had a lot of symptoms. But it was really beautiful to see the DNA and the microbiome both agree from a results standpoint, from a statistical or at least an evidentiary. It's like, wow, they were both in alignment. They both told us the story of what this person was experiencing. Now, the journey backwards is going to be a little bit longer because they're both out of alignment, but it's doable. They're going to get back to their health. But it's so much so much excitement to see people, because people need to know answers, in my opinion. Even in my own family, the not knowing what's wrong is paralyzing to people. Going to practitioner or physician to physician, I don't know, it must be in your head, it must be, I don't, it's just live with it. That is not helping the situation, and in fact making it worse. And once people can start to get answers, I think mentally that allows them to commit to this, right? To help them generate the energy and the motivation to fix once they know that they're not crazy. I mean, not to put it too bluntly, but it's nice to know, wow, I'm on the right track. Somebody gets me, right? I mean, I bet you've heard that a lot of times. Derek, you get me.
Yeah.
You get me. Now I can do this. I can turn this around. That's fantastic. I love it. Well, I know we're running close to time. I don't know if you have any other things that you'd like to chat about. We've had a bit of questions.
Yep.
We could play with. I know someone said methylgenic rocks. Thank you. That's amazing. I think someone was asking about mold in particular, how you might deal with a mold situation. And I of course always have something to say about that, but I can start, or you can start, whatever you'd prefer.
Yeah, go ahead. Go
yeah.
ahead.
So I think mold, particularly in parts of the United States where there's, humidity above 50, 60%, you are going to be always at risk if your immune system and all of the orifices that enter your body, if they're not healthy. So what that means is your lungs, your nasal passages, your throat, your gut, and even skin to some degree. Not only the mucosal immunity, but your biome needs to be healthy. Otherwise, you are at risk because your immune system is not going to handle these things, which is why we see the differences between two people living in a mold infested house. One is doing just fine. The other one is wrecked from a health standpoint. It's because of the way their body is responding to the toxins and to the mold in general. Just a non-toxic mold can actually inflame the lungs or inflame your body. So it's both cases. So some people seek out the aspergillus or the not the butococcus, but the Butystachys. And these are toxic molds, but just too much mold in general can trigger an inflammatory response that you just can't get out of as you keep breathing these guys. So we begin with, like you want to do the panels, right? There's blood work. We also can learn out of the genetics panel, the genetics and or microbiome. If you're doing that, we'll bring one soon to you guys. But right now, you can use other people. All three of these pieces will give you some insights as to how your body deals with detoxification and mold. The detox part of our genetics panel, we have to upregulate your detox pathways. We want to protect your mucosal immunity. So we have the clears, we have the 3 and 4 and Vivi, as we call it, depending on, where the symptoms are and where you want to get your lungs healthy, your gut healthy, your skin healthy for sure. Look for that. And I should have mentioned right off the bat, get out of this space or kill the mold that's in the space. That's that was, I overlooked that seriously. And then we rebuild the immune system on the backside of that and rebuild detox pathways. And I won't go through it again, but what Derek explained beautifully was these phases that he takes people through. And that's essentially the same thing that I would recommend you start with, the phase 1 and phase 2. And we can provide you more information on that later, because it'd take a while to go back through that. Or you can rewatch this, which I absolutely encourage everybody to do, because phasing people out of something like mold is the only true way to do that. There is no quick fix. It's phasing through that, because there's a lot of things that are happening inside the body when that mold has been wreaking havoc on these individuals, and you've got to work through the entire process. And you'll feel better every phase you go through. So that's the good news. I'm going to turn the rest over to you, Derek.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, phase 1, remove the source. You've got to stop the exposure. You can't detox what you're still being poisoned by, right?
Yep.
So, what I've seen is, mold protocols, they fail when exposure continues. So, test the environment with the ERMI or a HERT SMI 2 test. That's a really good one. So hire a certified mold remediator. I wouldn't just go with a general contractor if it were me. I do think HEPA filters and dehumidifiers keep the humidity under 50%, but I think those help. Phase 2, this is where, you open the drainage pathways and begin to pull mold toxins, mycotoxins from the system. So, consider it like a bind, drain, detoxify phase. So you open the drainage pathways. I would do this before binding. You want to ensure, proper bile flow, lymphatic movement, kidney and colon clearance. Number 2, I would bind the mycotoxins. And, again, for me, yes, we can talk about activated charcoal, bentonite, zeolite, clay, lots of different things. But, my go-to is always going to be Bindgenic. It's incredible. It's amazing. And then the support phase, right? So liver detox. So huge one. Mold, I guess I could call this a little pro tip, I guess. Mold disrupts brain detox. So, I would, if it were me, I would add in some neuro lymphatic support. That's going to be a really big one. And then I would say phase 3 is going to be the repair and rebuild process. So once detox is underway, you start healing the damage the mold caused. So like you were, to your point, the gut repair. And then, look at the hormone and immune support, because mold highly disrupts the HPA axis. And don't forget, you want to support those adrenals. And, in talking about peptides earlier, one that we would use for this, it would be the thymosin alpha-1. It's incredible for immune modulation. And then I would also probably add in at the very end mitochondrial repair, right? Some CoQ10, PQQ, B vitamins. Yeah. And then again, we use, you touched on the testing. We've used organic acids test to assess the mitochondrial damage and the fungal overgrowth. We've used Great Plains mycotoxin panel. That's a really good one. That's a urine panel. Real-time labs. Actually, that's another great one. What's another one we've used? Oh, VCS, visual contrast sensitivity test. That's like a really easy at-home screen for mold impact. And also too, I would just finish with, mold recovery is slow, but steady. And most protocols, they can last anywhere from 6 to 12 months, depending on, how bad it really was. I would look for Herxheimer reactions. These are common. And so with that, I go low and slow, pulse binders and drainage supports. And then emotional liability, fatigue, and food sensitivities are part of the mold picture, and improve as detox progresses as well. So yeah, I think that covered pretty much everything. I don't want to take up too much time. I know we're running short here, but I hope that helps a little bit. But basically just remove the exposure, drain and bind the toxins, and rebuild what the mold broke.
Yeah. And for those of you that have a lot of questions, we have a roadmap for that. I'm sure it's very similar to what Derek does from without having the specific test results. It's a situation that we see often in people. So we have some data there, and like Derek does, we can collaborate and let you guys know, for those of you that want to learn a little bit more about the removal phases for mold, which is similar to other types of pathogens as well. Mold has a particular detox scenario, but yeah, it's fantastic. And I really enjoyed having you on. It was amazing. And I hope everybody else did too. It was fun chatting. I could keep going, but I think you've got to get some work done today.
Well,
'Cause-
first, I just want to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude to Systemic Formulas for having me. It's really, truly an honor to be here. And, you know, this company has been a cornerstone in my practice for years. Not just because of the quality of your formulations, but because of the unwavering commitment to science, integrity, and true healing. Um, I've seen firsthand the difference that your products can make in people's lives, and I'm just incredibly grateful to be a part of a community that's pushing the boundaries of what's possible in functional and regenerative medicine. So, thank you, Dr. Shane, and all of Systemic Formulas, truly, for the opportunity to share, connect, and grow together. Grow together today.
Thank you so much. And we're very grateful as well, the whole team here. So, yeah, we'll chat again soon. And you have a great day, and you keep helping people. And I'm excited for your new facility.
Yes, thank you. You
See
guys
you.
are all invited.
Thanks.
Thank
Take care.
you. You too.
See ya.
Bye bye.